Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Will we see a changing of the guard in the AFC East this week, or will the Bills continue their hold on the Dolphins? Also, we get an inside look at Jim Harbaugh's wide receiver room, and Joe Mazulla wants all the smoke.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Bills have a stranglehold on the AFC East, but it feels as though their grip might be loosening. Are the Dolphins ready to capitalize and beat them? Our Locked On Bills and Locked On Dolphin hosts give their keys to victory.
Give me your three primary keys to victory.
My three primary keys to victory for the Buffalo Bills on Thursday night is, number one, the defensive line has to win. It has to be a dominant performance by the Bills up front. And I do have a level of concern. I mean, not a level of concern. I have a massive level of concern with the mismatches that Miami presents with their skill players. But it's that coupled with how I think the Bills will choose to match personnel with their back seven, leaning into dime, right? I think it's either going to be Jamarcus Ingram, that's who it was last week, or Mike Edwards potentially as that third safety that's going to play a decent amount, in addition to a guy like Dorian Williams having to fill in for Matt Milano. And so while you have some concerns about your back end and matching up with, the most explosive mix of skill players in the league, how do you overcome that? Your defensive line has got to dominate up front. And you have Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones and Greg Rousseau and Von Miller and Epinesa. These players have to be the catalysts up front, especially when you feel like you have some matchup opportunities that you can win with your talent up front. So number one is very clearly to me the defensive line, disrupting the run game, getting quick pressure on Tua. Number two for me is the Bills want to be this good rushing offense that has to show up in this game. And I know that Jacksonville was able to have a little bit of success running the football. I understand there's probably some alignment issues, week one type stuff, but the Bills need to be able to move bodies out of the way and be a physical rushing offense on Thursday night. For as much as we think about both of these as very high-scoring offenses and what they're capable of, I think the recipe for Buffalo has got to be staying committed to that run game and seeing what type of opportunities you can gain against Miami in their run defense. And number three, and this is kind of where I think it sets you up to kind of respond back on the last question that I had for the last segment, is I think the Bills have to find ways to stress the newness of Miami's defense. It's their third defensive coordinator in 3 years, and there's new pieces on all three levels, whether that's Calais Campbell up front, Jordan Brooks at linebacker, Kendall Fuller at corner, Jordan Poyer at safety. How do you stress that, right? I think misdirection's a way to do that. I think you can mix in tempo. I don't think you want to live in tempo. I mean, I know it's a night game, so you don't have the typical heat dynamics of a 1 o'clock afternoon kick in Miami, but it's going to be humid, right? It's a different level of humidity that the Bills are obviously not dealing with. So I don't think you want to be too crazy with tempo, but I think you want to kind of figure out your opportunities to mix in tempo to see if you can stress that communication and their ability to adjust and play on the fly. And the last thing I would say in terms of how can you stress the newness of the Miami defense is formational width. The Bills have been leaning into tighter formations, and I think bunch sets, playing things a little bit closer, whether they're going to play man, you can get some natural rubs, or if they're going to play zone, I think you kind of stress that communication because of how guys are going to release in the routes. I think that's where Buffalo has to find an edge is how can you challenge some of those new dynamics for Miami on the defense. And so my question, I guess, was, what have you learned? What does this defense want to be under Anthony Weaver and with their new mix of personnel?
So I had shared this post. You're familiar with Chris Vesser, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So Coach Vass, if you're not familiar, he's a defensive consultant, former high school coach, does a lot of amazing defensive football online content that helps make you a smarter fan of the game if you're into kind of the mechanics of how stuff works. He put out the post, and I'm going to read you the post to answer what is the identity of the Dolphins defense after week one. This is from Chris Vesser, and Dolphins fans heard this on Tuesday, so my apologies for hearing it again. Watching Dolphins defensive all 22, they're going to be fun this year to watch schematically. They had multiple 1-2 high disguise structures, different variations of 3 buzz, all-out 0 blitzes, zone quarters and half combos by formation, 3 cloud, multiple 2-deep corner sims, a variation of spike 1 rat, 3 and 2 deep fire zones, different variations of cover 3, both zone and match, and even bear fronts and tilt 6-1 looks. More looks in one game than most teams will run in a complete season, all in game 1. I'd say more different types of schemes than both the Flores and Fangio stuff combined.
Stay up to date on the Miami Dolphins and Buffalo Bills all year long by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today, Locked On Dolphins, and Locked On Bills on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, we go inside the Chargers wide receiver room. Before we get to that, Asia Wilson put on a show for Caitlin Clark. Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app and new users can get $20 off your first purchase with the code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price, guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Caitlin Clark may be setting the basketball world on fire, but Asia Wilson is still the top dog in the dub, and she reminded everyone why during the Aces' 86-75 win over the Fever in Indiana on Wednesday. Wilson set the single-season scoring record for the WNBA by scoring 27 and hauling in 12 rebounds. Wilson pushed her season total to 956 and still has time to get her total above 1,000. Of course, the scoring record had been 939 and held since, well, last year when Jewel Lloyd set it. Baltimore Ravens linebacker Kyle Van Noy has beef with the Kansas City Chiefs medical staff. Van Noy used the word unacceptable and unprofessional when describing his treatment from them in regard to an eye injury in Thursday's season opener. On his podcast, Van Noy went into detail about his complaint, saying, "I was supposed to see an ophthalmologist, and they took an entire quarter to get down to talk to me in the locker room." Van Noy suffered a fractured orbital bone in the third quarter while rushing Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes. After a disappointing Week 1 performance, the question had to be asked of Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow, how's the wrist?
When you come back from injury, you're always trying to keep the joint loose. That's part of ligament injuries. If you don't move it, you're going to lose it. So I'm always moving it around, keeping it loose, keeping my mobility the way that it's supposed to be. So, it's going to continue to happen. I do it at home. I do it here. I do it all the time. Feels great. Feels better this week than it did last week, than it did the week before. So it's continually getting better.
The LA Chargers saw their top 2 receivers leave this past offseason. With that, opportunity abounds. Locked On Chargers welcome Brendan Rice to the show to get an inside look at the wide receiver room from the son of the greatest of all time.
And we see it permeate throughout the wide receiver room. I mean, we saw it on Sunday when the wide receivers were getting down, scrapping that, they're not going to be bullied anymore. They are going to be the bullies. And that's the messaging from the top down from Jim Harbaugh.
Like that. You got to love seeing Lad McConkey too, man. Like little Lad McConkey, bro. Not afraid to mix it up when he has to. I think we saw it in that Rams game where he's in the back of the end zone putting some dude in the dirt. And it's like, Lads really like that. And you can see it in college, right? You're playing the SEC.
He's only 180.
Hey, non-negotiable, right? You're playing that. But, he was right in the middle of the beginning of that scrap. And I think that, obviously that super aggressive blocking that you guys had definitely was getting under their skin and was, a big part of the reason things boiled over. But like in the back of your mind, you got to kind of love that, right? Like, it's like, yeah, no, we're here. It's not stopping. We're up 12. We're still going to double team you in the back of the end zone on a play that's kind of over already. We're really about that life for sure.
No question.
Yeah, and then so like talk to us about the run blocking specifically though, because that is a place where the Chargers really struggled in years past, right? Just wide receivers, tight ends, as a group, just not being able to get the job done. But like, you were awesome in the preseason blocking. There was that one play that you set up the long Darius Davis touchdown, and like, you can't really see it all on the all 22 film that they put out on NFL.com, but all you see, Darius Davis zooming up the field, and then, some poor guy just trying to make his way off the sideline because you basically blocked him into the bench, one of the Cowboys players. That was really great to see, because all of a sudden, here goes Darius Davis. Like, where's Brendan Rice? Oh, he has a dude sitting on the bench on the wrong side of the field right now because he blocked him so hard. But like, it is, it's hard to say it's a thankless part of the game, but it's a very underrated part of being a wide receiver, right? But like David said, like, as a group, you can see it. Like, the buy-in is there. So like, what do you think it says about this group that you have all bought in to such an extent to give that effort in the run game?
Shoot. I think it says that we want to be great. This wide receiver room wants to be great. And I feel like Coach Suave Sanjay has definitely instilled the foundation of which we're going to build up from. And I feel like we got that foundation down. Now let's go ahead and carry it over. Stack days. Because we see the guys like Michael Crabtree or Larry Fitzgerald. And a lot of these guys in the NFL today, they just don't want to get their hands dirty. And I feel like this wide receiver room with the running backs that we have, it's only going to help us, help our run game, and open up the passing lanes for Justin, as well as create separation. Once these DBs get hit a certain amount of times, man, they create separation.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what you need, right? I mean, it helps in when you're out there running routes as well. But obviously, you were in the unique situation of being the son of, the greatest receiver of all time, which brings an extreme amount of expectations, right? I'm sure there are some positives to having him as your dad, but how important is it for you to blaze your own path and carve out your own successful career?
It's super important, man. That's everything to me. Every day I walk into the facility, and that's my mindset. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna go ahead and stack days. I'm gonna go ahead and put myself in a position so that when I do get on the field, I'm successful. I have his numbers drawn down on what he did his rookie year. Every day I open up my book. Heck yeah. So like, and that's still up for grabs. And I'm not gonna allow myself mentally to go, because I know, like, shoot, first game I'm in, I can possibly have a 100-yard game. You never know.
Stay up to date all year on the LA Chargers by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Chargers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, Joe Mazulla. He wants all the smoke. The Boston Celtics are enjoying an offseason of winning. Head coach Joe Mazulla sat down with Locked On Celtics John Corrales, and he's ready to defend this title.
You carry that stuff, all of this stuff into this upcoming season, right? You're trying to defend a championship, whether you want to phrase it that way or not. That's how we're looking at it. Do you see advantages, disadvantages from playing deep into June, having three of your guys playing on Team USA, and now all of a sudden, I'm sure it feels, you can say it's like just like any other summer, except you have less time. And you're immediately, and on top of it, the Abu Dhabi trip, right? That cuts your normal preparation time down by a week or so.
It's a little bit more than I had in year one, so I'm sure we'll be okay.
Fair enough. Good perspective to have. But from the player's perspective, does it give you any sort of advantage running it back? Like you've made minimal additions, knowing that everybody's back and they all know the terminology, all that stuff. Do you just dive right into like, okay, we can skip ahead 3 pages, or do you have to go back to the beginning and say, we're going to reinforce everything that we do and just go through that same process?
No, you start even before the basics. I think you have to start all over again. And, you can't make any assumptions. And to me, it goes back to those concepts and principles that we talked about, earlier in the show. Is it's very easy to lose. It's very easy to lose. And we have to study what goes into the idea of what goes into winning and what leads to losing, and recommit and rebuild the habits that lead to winning. At the same time, we have to be innovative. And so us getting better is going to be different than other teams getting better. Us getting better has to be a commitment to individual growth. Us getting better has to be a commitment to not doing it the way we've done it before just because we think that's worked once. And so we have to find a balance of sticking to the principles of what we do, and at the same time being innovative in difference. And we'll find small areas culturally and on both sides of the ball to innovate, and then we have to make a commitment to just getting better as an individual every single day. And yeah, you're right. Like, that's not the phrases we're going to use, but at the end of the day, that's what people are going to say is you're defending a quote unquote title. But I think the word defend is a very passive aggressive term. And you go back to the animal kingdom, some of the strongest animals don't defend. They're the most aggressive, and they attack the most. And so we've gone into a season not winning and we've gone into a season winning. At the end of the day, your mindset can't change. You have to understand what goes into winning and losing. You have to understand the mental toughness that goes into it, and you have to commit to the details on a daily basis. And then you also have to have some things go your way.
Yeah, because last season, I know Jalen especially, but a lot of guys talked about we didn't skip any steps. And it feels like, to me on the outside, coming in after winning a championship with you look around and your starting 5 is essentially the same. You've got Al in there. We know KP is going to be out for a couple of months and all of that. But when he comes back in, it's basically the same. You look around, I feel like there's like a propensity to be like, okay, we know certain things. We can skip a step. How do you avoid that mentality of, well, I already know this, right? When you've studied you spent last season studying for a test, cramming for a test, and working through all the steps to pass that test. Now you have, I think, a lot of the answers to that test. And when you have the answers, there's this feeling of like, I don't need to study. How do you fight that?
I mean, you think the Blue Jays knew how to catch an infield fly ball? They didn't do it under duress.
Right.
They didn't do it under duress.
That happens. That's not a matter of preparation.
No, that is a matter of preparation. But communication is a part of preparation. Like, in order to have the defensive game plan and the scheme and the adjustments down right, you have to be able to communicate at a high level under duress. And so it's not about, the necessary term skipping steps, because we can go out there every day and make sure we focus on the fundamentals. It comes down to, can you translate them to high duress moments individually and together, and build that mindset. That doesn't mean that, like, we're going to have difficult moments of the season. Like, that's going to happen. If you study, the season after the championship season for the last 15 years, the longest losing streak is 7. The second longest losing streak is 5. No team has made it past the second round in the last 6, 7, or 8 years. So there's all these things that go into winning and losing.
And finally, on Monday night, Braylon Allen made history. You may think, that guy who got 1 carry for 8 yards and 1 catch for 9 yards, that was history? And yes, it was, because at just 20 years old, Allen is now the youngest player in the Super Bowl era to gain a yard in an NFL game. Thinking back on where I was when I was 20. Yeah, pretty record setting. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, who will have the best week 2 in the NFL? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.